Okay, welcome to WhizGirls Academy Super Secret Agent Trainees. Today we have the amazing Sarah Chambless, and I hope I said that right. She is a partner at Fenwick, and that is a really big law firm focused on tech. It's actually the first law firm that was representing Apple, right, Sarah?
That's right. Yeah, we formed Apple Computers.
Amazing. So she's going to share her journey with us in STEM, and she's going to start with her childhood. So tell us about your childhood, and welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, so I'm a partner at Fenwick. We do only technology and life sciences work. So we work with some of the most exciting, innovative startups in tech and biopharma and med tech and space and autonomous transportation and AI and just and obviously gaming. So even though I'm not an engineer or a scientist, I get to work with them every day, which is super fun. Let's see. So my childhood. So I grew up in the South. I grew up in Georgia, in Metro Atlanta, in the suburbs, and I was raised by a single mom, and she was an engineer. So I actually had a really unique upbringing. I was raised by a woman who was a professional with a PhD in chemical engineering at a time when women did not do that. They did not even really graduate college. They had babies really young and they became moms, and sometimes they were elementary school teachers and sometimes they were secretaries. But when my mom had me, she was actually in her master's program and pursuing a degree in environmental engineering. She had been a nuclear engineer and then she transitioned into environmental engineering. So I grew up, spent my young childhood years on the campus and playing under her desk when she was grading papers and messing with her slide rule and, scribbling on her papers. And then she went on to get her PhD from Georgia Tech. And I spent a lot of time in the labs watching her create punch cards for the old supercomputers, and just got a lot of exposure to basically how to be an awesome, high achieving professional woman in STEM without really knowing it. And I think my most important takeaway from my childhood was my mother really valued education. So even being a single mom and raising a child, she finished her master's degree, she finished her PhD. And then even after I grew up and I went to college, she actually went back to school and got her MBA at the same time as I was getting my undergraduate degree. We actually graduated on the same day from Emory. She got her MBA from the business school and I got my undergraduate degree. And so it was just really neat to see that you never stop learning and you can always keep pushing yourself forward, pushing the envelope, doing more. You're not limited. You're not ever limited. If you have access to education, the world is your oyster. So that was my biggest thing as a kid. I never really knew that women couldn't do anything they wanted to do because I had this incredible example right in front of me.
That is so cool. And there's so many things that came out of that. Like, first of all, I think that's phenomenal that you went to school and your mom did at the same time. That's really, really cool. I'm curious, when did you first hear about STEM? So that's science, technology, engineering, and math. And did you have any mentors along the way?
Yeah, no, I mean, so I grew up with STEM all around me. My mother being an engineer, like I mentioned, I basically grew up in labs, spinning around on tall stools and, sitting at drafting desks, and would go to, after my mom started working at the engineering firm, going into the office with her on the weekend, looking at her rolling out drawings and schematics and just basically doing the day-to-day job of being an engineer, being a really technical person, bringing value to corporations as an engineer. And so it was really just very much infused in my upbringing. My father is also an engineer. He's an electrical engineer. And so, even when I would spend time with him, for fun, he designed amplifiers. So, which is hard for me to imagine that being a hobby, but that's what you do when you're an engineer. So he would always be like drawing out electrical schematics on a legal pad and tinkering with circuit boards. And he would build tube amps, and he had several patents that he filed for just for fun. Again, just all for fun. So yeah, to me, it was like, well, everybody does STEM. That's what why wouldn't you? That's just what you do. So it was just very much in my universe. I didn't really have to go looking for it. It was all around me.
That's really interesting. How old were you when you were watching him do these amplifiers and the patents and all these things?
It was really from the time I was very young until still today. When I go to visit him, he has he calls it his listening room. Because he's an audiophile, and he still has all these old tube amps that he's always working on. And actually, it was really I had some very insightful moments as a young child watching him communicate with other family members who were autistic or on the autism spectrum, who were nonverbal, but they would draw circuits with each other. So they would sit at the kitchen table and just do mathematical problems and draw circuits. So yeah, it was all around me. And really the whole time I was growing up, I was just observing just very high achieving people solving problems in STEM. And so, even as a lawyer, where I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist, I still entered my practice with a very strong scientific curiosity and a desire to explore and work with innovative people who are doing that kind of work and help them just be the best innovators they could be.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I know you said your dad had the hobbies, but I'm curious to hear like what your passions and hobbies were as a child, and now if that has led you to your dream job, or what your dream job was initially as a child.
Yeah, no, I was actually very artistic as a kid. So I loved to play the piano. I loved music, which actually I think is pretty mathematical in terms of the parts of your brain that it fires off. I played the viola as a young adult, a child, and then into my college years, I played in a lot of different orchestras and quartets, string quartets, and then I danced. And I just excelled in the visual arts too. When I was in middle school and high school, I loved to write, and I adored reading more than just about anything else. So my nickname in elementary school was the walking encyclopedia, which is kind of terrible, but I was always using these really big words that you wouldn't normally use in regular speech. And so I got teased a little bit, but I always had my head in a book and loved to read. And so for me, my dream job was, from a pretty early time, it was to be a lawyer, because somebody told me at some point that lawyers get to read and write all day. And so to me, that was just the most perfect job I could imagine. And so, I think at the time I thought of lawyers as being people who went into courtrooms and argued cases and talked in front of a judge. But when I actually went to law school, I learned a little bit before that, but as I entered law school, about all the things that you could do with a law degree, like business or transactional law, or working with technology companies, creating intellectual property, negotiating customer agreements. And so then it was like, oh, wait, I can put all of these things together.
That's very, very cool. So I'm curious, how did you decide to go to Emory? Was it like the school that you dreamed of going to?
Yeah, Emory's a fantastic school, and it was right in my backyard. I think I was really lucky to have access as a local student to such a great school. I did look at a lot of other schools around the country, and I mentioned that I played the viola, so I actually applied to some conservatories in different places, but ultimately just decided to take advantage of what was right in my backyard because Emory had a lot of different programs, and so I could do a lot of exploring. And when I graduated, I actually graduated in May of 2002 from college. So that was right after the September 11th attacks, right? And the economy was in a very bad place. It was, the stock market was in a bad place. Companies were not hiring. I thought I would be a journalist or a teacher for a few years before I went back to graduate school. And the Teach for America, I was looking at possibly doing a teaching abroad program. But then when September 11th happened, the world became a pretty unstable place for a while politically. And so I decided to stay here in the US and learned about Teach for America. And that was what originally brought me out to California.
That's a really good point. I was going to ask you, how did Teach for America happen? And I know that was from like 2002 to 2005. So like, walk us through that transition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had studied Japanese for about 6 years between high school and college, and I thought that I would teach in Japan. But as I mentioned, that didn't seem like the right choice after 9/11. So I applied to Teach for America. And because I had grown up in the South and gone to college in the South, I really just wanted to travel and go someplace new. And when I got the form from Teach for America, at the time they would send you a form and you couldn't pick where you wanted to go, but you could tell them like first, second, and third choice. And I just basically checked the boxes that were furthest away from Georgia. So it was like Anchorage, Alaska, San Francisco, and Los Angeles. And I ended up in LA. And that was how I ended up in LA. So I taught in Compton for 3 years. And it was one of the most incredible things I've done in my entire life.
Okay, I want to hear more about that. But first, you got to tell us why Japanese out of all of the languages. Like, why? I'm sure our super secret agents are curious as well. Like, Japanese.
So a couple of things. One, it was interesting and different, right? I was lucky to go to a high school that did have a Japanese program. So I could have taken German or French or Spanish or, what you would consider to be a more kind of traditional second language course, but it was different and it was fresh and not a lot of people were doing it. So that was kind of appealing. But also, at that time in the 90s, Japan was a hotbed of innovation. It was, the electronics industry, the telecommunications industry, all of this innovation was coming out of Japan. And yet it was and is a very insular culture that can be hard to access. And so it's, if you're interested in STEM, if you're interested in innovation and you want to learn a new language, you think about these things. Should I take Mandarin? Should I take German? All of it feeds into what, you think you're going to do in the future. And at that time, it seemed like a good direction to go.
Interesting, because Steve Jobs also talks about Japanese in his commencement speech for Stanford, how that led to Apple and all the things. So there's definitely something with Apple going on, not just with you at Fenwick, but there's definitely that path and the trail.
Right. And when you think about how, even you think about the car industry, right, in the assembly line and the evolution from, the earliest prototype cars to Ford and the assembly line, but then how the Japanese took that and completely revolutionized it by stopping the assembly line. anytime somebody needed time to fix something, and making everyone accountable for creating the best product that they could. And they totally took over the US car market with their fuel efficient, reliable, long lasting cars, the early Toyota Corollas and the Honda Civics, right? They were incredible innovators, even when the starting point was US technology. So yeah, that time in the 90s was the time when a lot of that was happening.
Yeah, and the Prius too. I mean, I have a Prius and that's my third one, so I can totally say yes, Toyota.
I am a very happy driver of a Japanese car myself. So yeah, they're wonderful vehicles and they last for a really long time. And yeah, the hybrid technology, right? They were the early adopters of that hybrid technology in the Prius, and they've continued to innovate that and push that even to this day. That's where I think Toyota really leans in. And yeah, I mean, Steve, he really took that whole approach to perfection and creating this beautiful, perfect product that was completely seamless with the user experience. And I think a lot of that really did come from Japan.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, Japan has a lot of innovation. I know when I was working at Mattel and MGA on Barbie and Bratz, we always looked to Japan for the new trends and everything. So I can see that for sure. I can see that. Now I think our secret agents will understand why Japanese. It makes sense. And me too, which is, a plus. Okay, so let's backtrack again to Compton. And so out of all of the school districts in the world, you decide Compton. So tell us how that happened.
Yeah, so I was placed in Compton by Teach for America, but what was interesting about that experience was it was challenging, but not in the way that I expected it to be. And so, anytime you're going into an experience, really just challenging your assumptions, and all of that relates to your background and all of your bias and your implicit bias. But I came into the school district expecting the hard part to be the students, and it was the opposite. So the hard part was the bureaucracy, the kind of lack of what I felt to be the lack of attention and care to the needs of the students, and really putting the student at the center of the learning experience. And I was young and very idealistic, and I had boundless energy, and I just wanted everybody to learn. But I felt like so many times when I was dealing with different people, not necessarily in my school, but at the district level, even something as simple as like getting materials to do a science experiment with my class, or getting the supplemental materials that go along with the textbooks, or getting budget to do a field trip to the Natural History Museum. Like all of those things, I would meet with friction that indicated to me that it was not like their goal that the students learn. They had other goals, but my students were delightful. They were sharp and, listen, when you have 35 10 and 11-year-olds in your class, they will tell you if you are boring them. They will let you know if you are not keeping it interesting and keeping it moving along and engaging with them. And but they really were, and still to this day I keep in touch with some of them on social media. They're all grown up and they have kids of their own now, but it was surprising to me in a really great way that my kids were the ones that were the easiest and the best part of the whole equation. It was delightful to work with them.
That's really cool. So this is elementary school. So you said you had 10 and 11-year-olds. And how long did you do that for?
I was there for 3 years. Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. And then you decided that basically teaching is not for you. So at what point did you go to LMU?
Yeah, so I went to LMU while I was teaching. I immediately enrolled in a master's program that I was able to do while I was teaching full time. So it was an evening program, and I went to school after I would get off of school, teaching school, I would go to my master's program at 4 p.m. and learn at the university for 2 to 3 hours several times a week. And then I would have my own homework to do on the weekends after I graded papers and everything. And so I was doing that program and then got my master's degree in year 2 of my teaching. And it had always been my plan to go back to graduate school. So it wasn't that I gave up on teaching necessarily. It was more, I really valued those years as giving me time to explore what I wanted to do next and have some maturity going into graduate school and some focus.
Very cool. Okay, so then was next, I guess, is Emory Law School, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, walk through that transition as well.
Yeah, so I went back to Emory for law school, mainly because they gave me a scholarship, which, single mom, that's, there just wasn't a lot. So I got a lot of scholarships and did a lot of that. And I did apply to a lot of different law schools, but I got lucky with Emory. Went back home, moved back in with my mom, went to law school. But again, headed into that, I would say I had a desire to take a different turn in life and to do more in the business environment, in the business world. So I had taught school, and I had worked for a newspaper in college. I had done some journalism. I had studied the humanities and languages and all of that. And so I wanted to learn more about, what makes our economy go. And I wanted to learn more about businesses. So when I went into law school, I decided to take as many courses related to business and transactional law as I could. So I took corporate law, M&A, real estate finance, a lot of intellectual property law. I really enjoyed everything related to IP law. Kind of stayed away from trials and litigation. And, I learned pretty quickly that I was not really interested in fighting with other people for a living. And I enjoyed being in a situation where everyone has the same goal that they're trying to achieve. And so you might be negotiating against another side, but you're all trying to get to the same place. And so I took a lot of courses that were focused on different types of business law. And then when I graduated, ended up going into doing that full time and ultimately focusing on technology companies, which pulls back in all of the interest in intellectual property.
Interesting. So then soon after you came back to LA and started working at Manat, or like how long did that take?
Yeah, so I knew even when I went back to Emory that I wanted to end up back in California. So I'd fallen in love with California. And, although I will always be a Southerner and I will always love the South, the thing is California is such a hotbed of innovation. So, this would have been, the mid 2000s, there was a tremendous amount that was being innovated on, and a lot of it was coming out of California. So you mentioned Apple computers, the first iPhone coming out in 2007, right? Even prior to that, Apple, in 1999 really unlocked something, really unlocked a whole new market when they convinced the music labels to sell their songs digitally for 99 cents. That was tremendous. Companies like Google, all of that was happening during that time frame. You had, and then there were the companies that came up in the late 90s and early 2000s were kind of dying down, like the e-toys and different things like that. But then there was this whole new wave of innovation that was coming during that time. So that was really compelling. I wanted to be in the place where all of this stuff was happening.
That makes sense. Yeah, and that's so true. I get it completely. Okay, so how long were you at Minot for?
So I was there for almost 12 years. Yeah.
Okay, so during this time, you, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, were selected as a Variety Hollywood New Leader and Lawyer, and also Southern California Super Lawyers Rising Star every year since 2015.
Yeah. So I was really lucky to arrive at Manat. It is a fantastic, one of the preeminent law firms, particularly in entertainment. So they are a full service law firm, but they really core DNA in the entertainment industry here in Los Angeles. So as a corporate attorney, I had a lot of exposure all through my career to working on transactions that involved some entertainment component. But during that time, there was a lot of innovation that was occurring around digital media with OTT platforms and MCNs and MPNs. That stands for multi-platform networks, YouTube, Twitch, and all of the kind of the new uses that were being developed for social media as a way to disseminate content. And so the work that I was doing was less traditional entertainment like film finance, and it was more focused on these new forms of creating and disseminating content on these new platforms. And we built an integrated service model that offered legal and consulting services to our new media clients. And so the recognition in Variety was tied back to some of that work that I was doing at Manat during that time.
Very cool. And so after Minot, you came to Fenwick, where you are now, and was started as a partner.
Yeah, so I made partner at Manat in 2017 and transitioned over to Fenwick in mid 2019 as a part of Fenwick's first Southern California expansion. So joined as a part of the office opening here in Santa Monica. And I think I was attorney number 7, and I was the first partner to be recruited from Los Angeles. So the other partners had moved down from Silicon Valley, essentially, to launch the office, and they recruited me as kind of the first person from the LA ecosystem to help them expand. And I have been here since then. We've grown the office from 7 at that time to now, I think, around 80 attorneys and paralegals. So we've grown very quickly and work with some of the most exciting SoCal-based technology companies.
Very cool. And can you tell us a little bit about your expertise and what you focus on at Fenwick?
So my practice is about, I'm trying to think about how to encapsulate it because there's a lot of things that I do. I help companies with strategizing around their ownership. It's probably the most succinct way to put it. So in the beginning of your company, when you set up your company, you may be the only owner of the company. But over the course of time, as you take on investment, you're bringing other owners into your company. And I help companies strategize and think about how to do that and navigate that experience. And in particular, in the venture capital world, there's a particular way that deals get done, and there's a particular ecosystem. And so I do a lot of work in that space. And I also help companies think about exit strategy. So mergers and acquisitions, which is a fancy way of saying when you want to sell your business, how do you do that? But the other thing I do is I build teams around the companies within the firm. So, in the beginning, the company doesn't need a lot of different types of lawyers. Maybe they need me to help them think about things early on. But as they grow, they're going to need different types of lawyers on their teams. They need lawyers who specialize in employment law. They may need lawyers that specialize in different types of regulations like healthcare or entering into contracts with the government. They may need patent lawyers. They may need trademark lawyers. And I help pull in the different specialists within the firm and build a team around the client to support the client's business as the business grows and matures. And so that project management function is also just a big part of what I do.
Very cool. You also sit on the board of, or advisory board of OSEA, OSEA. Can you tell us what that stands for? Angel Investors. And you're very into women executives and entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love helping female founders get access to capital. That's one of my passions, and it's one of the things that keeps propelling me forward in the world of startup today. So I sit on the advisory board of it's an Orange County based angel investing network, mostly comprised of women. So these are women who have achieved success in their lives, they're high net worth, and they're interested in investing in new technology ventures. And I help them mainly just think about strategy with respect to deal flow and company evaluation and direction of the organization. But yeah, here in Southern California, there's a pretty strong and thriving network of women founders, and now more and more we're seeing more women investors. So they bring potentially a unique perspective on, different markets that maybe traditional investors would have overlooked, or different ways of solving problems.
Very cool. Okay, so how can our super secret agents start looking into law, tech, and finance?
So I think the best thing you can do if you're interested in law or tech or finance is just be a good student. I mean, honestly, if you have a good academic foundation, if you're paying attention in school and you're doing extracurricular activities that support your academics in school, that's really 90% of it. It's 90% of the opportunity that you can run after as you grow and mature. It has to be the foundation and the cornerstone of everything. And I am biased, obviously, because I grew up with someone in my life who told me that education would solve any problem that I could possibly have. But I really do believe that's true. It opens all the doors. Having good grades and being smart will take you almost anywhere you want to go.
So true. All right. What did you learn when you were 11 years old that you have kept with you today?
So when I was 11, so school had always been pretty easy for me until I got to the 6th grade. And when I was 11, I suddenly was getting bad grades in math and science, which was weird. It was not normal for me. And, my mother, of course, wanted to know what was going on. And what kind of turned out was that I did not have a good relationship with my math and science teacher. He had a tendency to be kind of sarcastic and demeaning. And I was not comfortable raising my hand in class. So I was afraid to ask questions, because anytime I asked questions in class, I was made to feel dumb. And I remember finally kind of confiding in my mother about this problem that I was having. And so, of course, she went to a teacher conference and she met with my teacher. And I remember how much it changed his behavior after that. He suddenly became more patient and more helpful. And I did start to do better in his class, and ultimately developed a little bit more confidence to speak up and ask questions. The lesson that I learned is this: sometimes you do need to try harder and do better in school, but sometimes it is not you. is sometimes it's your teacher. I mean, I hate to say it, but all the teachers are human. And this actually did stick with me because even, as I was getting my master's in education and then going on to law school, I can remember circumstances where, I was blaming myself for not doing well, but it turned out that it actually wasn't my fault. It was, sorry, my phone's going off. It was the teacher's fault. And so I think when you're having that experience, looking for other people who can be advocates for you, other people who can help you learn the material in a new and different way, it can be a good way to solve the problem as opposed to just, giving up or internalizing the blame and believing it's actually your fault. And I remember in my master's program learning something which it totally blew my mind, but it ties back to this concept. And that is this: tests are not for students. Tests are for teachers. Tests are not to see whether the student, has passed or failed. It's to see if the teacher has passed or failed. Has the teacher done their job? Have they taught all of the students what they need to know? And if somebody is failing, it's on the teacher to get them to where they need to be. And I remember learning that, and it just blew my mind. And I thought about this teacher in the 6th grade and how he had to change, right? He had to alter his behavior in order to help me better learn and feel more confident. So, even when I went on to law school, in law school, they give one test at the end of the semester, which I remember as a former teacher, I was like, this is crazy. Like, how do you guys know if you've done your job or not when you only give one test at the end of the semester? This doesn't make any sense. Like, what kind of a school is this? And I remember I even went to talk to the dean about it because I was so blown away. I was like, I was a teacher. Do you guys not know how to teach? Because you're not teaching very well if you're only giving one test at the end of the semester. And so anyway, I think the lesson here is, you have to do your best in school. You got to try your hardest. When you're struggling, seek help. But just remember, sometimes you may not have the right teacher, and you may need to find a different teacher to help you learn the material in a different way, or find a parent or an advocate who can help the teacher understand your needs. It is not always your fault. Sometimes the teacher needs to improve. Every student has the capacity to learn. Everybody can do the work. Sometimes it's on the teacher. So that's what I learned when I was 11.
That's really awesome that you shared that, because I think a lot of our super secret agents are in those age ranges right now. And I think it's really important. You did a few things that is very brave at the time. Like, first of all, you said that you're not being encouraged by your teacher, which is the reason why you're not doing well. And I think that's a huge part of it, because like you said, the teachers are here to teach, and if they teach effectively, then you can learn and grow and move on. But if they're not, and they're discouraging you and you're making you not feel good enough, basically, that's something that kind of sticks for a while. So I really applaud you for standing up for what's right, and also becoming a teacher and then going on the other side. And I'm sure having that experience with your students as well, and then going to the law school and telling them, that as well, like, that's huge.
Like, you're charging so much money and I just have to go teach myself everything that you're teaching me in class. So that was really it was enlightening. But yeah, my hope is that everyone listening in understands that that they can learn, and sometimes they have to find a good teacher.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. All right. So on that note, what superpowers do you find that you have that pushed you to where you are today?
Oh boy. So persuasion is so critical to what I do. And it is, persuasion and advocacy are characteristics that I think I observed in, as I mentioned, my mother and other powerful people in my life early on. But yeah, the power to marshal your arguments and think about all the reasons why you need what you need, or in my case, my client needs what they need, and to think creatively in designing those answers. I think that's probably a big superpower and a big through line.
Very, very cool. Okay, on that note, what advice would you give in general to our super secret agent trainees that are listening in the audience today?
So my advice is pay it forward. So if you don't know what that means, what it means is do something for someone else that before they ask you for it, or before they've ever done anything for you. The best example is if you're standing in line to get a coffee or something. When you get up and you order your coffee, you just say, hey, I'm going to buy the person behind me, I'm going to buy their coffee. That's like the best example. But I think it also pertains to, in the professional world, I talk to so many people before they're ever ready to work with me professionally. So I encounter a lot of people who they have questions, they're trying to solve a problem, and they need some advice. And that's what I do for a living. I give people advice. And sometimes I'll give a lot of advice away for free before it ever comes back around. And sometimes it doesn't come back around through the normal ways. Sometimes this person will tell this person who will tell this person who will call me and say, hey, I hear, you're the best person to talk to about this and I want to hire you. But one of the things that I've learned doing what I've done now as a lawyer for 16 years is it's one of the most powerful ways to build notoriety and reputation and network is just to give it away for free for a really long time before anyone's ever ready to pay you. And then it eventually will come back like tenfold.
Awesome. Very cool. Okay, so now we're going to switch to some of the student questions that came in. This is actually a comment, but then there's a question. So you are a real life a role model, and a real life superhero. Have you had someone who inspired you along your journey, and how did their encouragement help you become even more awesome?
Oh gosh, when I was in the 10th grade, not the 10th grade, when I was 10 years old and I was in the 5th grade, one of our projects was we had to write an essay about a real life superhero in our life. And I wrote about my mom. I'm pretty sure she still has this essay to this day. I'm sure she still saves it. But yeah, she was a real role model for me, still is a role model for me, as someone who could really just break down any barrier in front of her professionally, personally. She was an excellent role model to me as an engineer. At a time when women didn't do that, as a professional woman in a professional role in a global engineering firm, at a time when women didn't do that, climbing the corporate ladder, and then also raising me as a mom, being my mom and being a great mom, being very present and very available. And so I didn't really understand. I mean, probably would still say I really don't understand that there's anything I can't do professionally, because I had her in my life every day, just doing it and showing me that it could be done.
That's awesome. Yeah, mom was a huge influence. That's amazing. Yeah. She's done that for you. That's phenomenal. Yeah. Okay, so next question. What's your dream for the future when it comes to law, tech, and finance?
Oh gosh. Well, AI is a deeply, deeply disruptive technology that I think in every one of those categories, we will have to reckon with how we use it to achieve better results for our client, but also where it fits, right? Where it fits in the ecosystem. How does it work? What are the externalities that we have to solve for? And how do we ultimately deliver better results? Like it's the one thing that I would say as an industry right now, we are all grappling with. It's a tool that has the capacity to make what we do so much more efficient and so much more accurate. And yet sometimes it does really weird things that are really unpredictable. So you can't just substitute it for a lawyer, right? We all have to learn how to use it and what the boundaries are and how to make it smarter and integrate it into something that we've done in a very particularly traditional way for a really long time. And I really do think it's going to completely change what we do. It's not going to replace us. It will never be able to replace us. But it's different from, going from having handwriting to a typewriter to a computer. This is completely different from that because it can ingest huge volumes of information and then reach conclusions and generate really creative results. So I think that's the area where I think we're spending a lot of time, and I don't know what the answer is. I really don't, but it's exciting.
It is. AI is very exciting. And actually, this next question is relative in a sense. So looking into the future is exciting. What do you imagine for girls in STEM down the road, and how can we make sure that everyone gets a chance to be part of the STEM adventure?
Right? I know. How do we get girls engaged in STEM from a really young age, right? And I have to think about, as a teacher, how do we disrupt the kind of the ways in which we subtly discourage girls from going in that direction or subtly encourage them to go the other way. It's a really complex and multifaceted problem. But I think, more girls in gaming, more girls in programming, there's so much opportunity for girls who can code. With my clients, every single one of them is focused on how to create a more diverse workforce. My clients that are innovating in autonomous transportation, in space, in other areas of frontier tech understand and are deeply conscious of the fact that they don't have enough women and they need more women. But that starts with really young girls and helping them develop that interest and and then helping them, encouraging them to pursue it all along the way and not to feel discouraged or like they're weird or any of that. I would say today there is a really strong desire and need and appreciation for women in STEM, but also this feeling of, but where are they? We can't find them anywhere. So yeah, I mean, girls going into STEM, learning to code, learning IoT and how to build things and use Raspberry Pi and, all the gaming engines, like do it all, get into it. Because there is a market for it.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. How can our special secret agent trainees follow your journey moving forward? Do you have LinkedIn, Instagram, a website?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So I'm on LinkedIn. I think that's probably the best way to follow me professionally. And you'll see I just post a ton about women in tech. That's my thing. So yeah, feel free to reach out and connect and follow.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. We're going to do 60-second quick answers and then key takeaways. So what's your favorite toy?
Oh, My Little Pony.
Awesome. That's actually Hasbro. So I didn't work for Hasbro, but I worked for all the rest of them. So that's wild. Favorite video game?
I'm not much of a video game player. Can I say like tabletop game? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So I love to play Dungeons and Dragons. That's my favorite thing. And it has been for probably about 15 years now. So
Awesome.
awesome.
Favorite sci-fi? So like anything, or Star Wars versus Star Trek?
Oh, definitely Star Wars. Definitely Star Wars. 100%. I love Star Trek too, though. No shade on Star Trek.
Yeah, the Force is strong. I know I was doing a lot of research on Star Trek from the 60s, which was phenomenal, and just how advanced Gene Roddenberry was. Like, I mean, I think George Lucas was advanced in his own way, but like that was insane. Like
Yes.
cell phones, and like back in the 60s, like he was seeing all this stuff, which was
Yeah. Yeah, the like the teleporting and I mean all of it. Yes, it's incredible.
Yeah, very cool. Favorite superhero?
I'm just gonna go with Wonder Woman. I mean, she's the coolest, and she makes it all look so easy.
So true. I grew up with Wonder Woman too. So the original, I guess, Linda Carter is the one we grew up with. Yeah,
Linda Carter for sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Favorite show growing up as a kid?
Favorite show growing up. So we didn't have cable. I liked Saturday morning cartoons, right? So He-Man and She-Ra, definitely top of the list. I think they brought She-Ra back too. I think there's like a new version of She-Ra.
Yeah, and Mattel brought He-Man back too. It's totally wild. Yeah. So cool. Yeah, I used to watch both of those too, and Orko was my favorite.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And also, here's another one from the Wayback Machine. So they made a cartoon about the Ewoks. I don't know if you remember this one. The Ewok cartoon was awesome.
Yeah, so true. Let's see. Favorite TV show now, or streaming, whatever, just now, like whatever.
So, let's see. I am watching right now. Really love The Witcher. It's that whole like Dungeons and Dragons fantasy thing, but yeah, really love The Witcher. Really love Wheel of Time, and I'm also enjoying The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel just because of I don't know. They're really doing a good job of teasing apart all of the gender role issues from back in the 60s and 70s, and also just making it really funny, just cool in a Mad Men kind of a way.
Yeah, no, it's great. I was obsessed as a powerful female role model. Like, I think Maisel is like phenomenal. I've heard different stories about how maybe the story is loosely based on, I can't remember her name, the one that passed away. She has a daughter. She was on QVC, Joan Rivers.
Oh, interesting. I hadn't heard that, but now I'm going to have to dig into that.
Yeah, I heard, I was like, whoa, really? Like, that's interesting. I don't know.
That is super interesting. But actually, now that you mention it, it does kind of line up a little bit, right? I mean, it makes sense. Very cool.
Wild.
Except for the mother-daughter relationship, that doesn't really.
Yeah, not really, because I think they had a pretty close relationship, but I think there was like, it's loosely based on that. Interesting. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. We're going to do key takeaways now. And if I missed anything, please, feel free to add. All right. Always keep pushing yourself to learn. The world is your oyster. Be curious. Take up opportunities to learn. You can do anything you want to do. Look around for your inspiration. Own up to your interests. Find appeal in the unknown. Always reach out for support. Understand your needs. And I think the last one was, which I wanted to add, was like, obviously learn to code, learn gaming engines. That's my world. So that's all about it.
Yay. Yes. Love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your time and your journey with us at Fenwick and beyond. And we're really excited to see what you do next. And I think our super secret agents will be loving to follow you moving forward.
Absolutely. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. And bye from WhizGirls Academy today. We'll see you all tomorrow, super secret agent trainees. Bye.